Welcome back everybody. I am Mohib, your trainer for entire Spring series in Code with Mohib YouTube channel. In the last video we talked about Spring IOC container, and in this video I'll teach you about dependency injections, ways of dependency injection, and the data type. So without wasting much time, let's jump into today's class. But before that, don't forget to subscribe my channel and hit the bell icon to get notified when a new video is uploaded. So let's talk about dependency injection. Even though we have talked about dependency injection in the first video, what dependency injection means and how dependency injection is performed. But in today's class, I'll elaborate, or I'll explain that in details and in a real-time example how it is done, and in project how we do that. Assume that we have a class. Assume that we have a class called, for example, student. And this student class has different properties like ID, name, and address. As you can see that ID is an int type, name is a string type, and address is a user-defined data type that is called a class. So this means that we have another class called address, and inside address class we have some different values. For example, that is here. The address class has string street, string city, string state, and string country. So there are two classes. The first one is a student class and the second one is the address class. And you can see that in student class we have a user-defined data type that is address. This means that the address class holds some other values like street, city, state, and country. Now this class is somehow dependent on address class. It means the student class is dependent on address class. This means that first the IOC container must insert or inject the values of address class into street, city, state, and name country, and then these values will be later injected into student class like address of variable. So Spring IOC container, assume that this is a Spring IOC container. Let me draw, for example, this is IOC container. So IOC container or Spring framework will create address class object and then injects all the values of address class at runtime. We can say, if we say at runtime, it is also right at runtime. So at runtime, and the container will make them ready for use. So IOC or Spring framework will also create or make the student class object and sets the value of student, like for example ID, name, and will inject the address class object into address variable. It means it will first, for example, the city, it will inject the values of city, street, city, state, country, and then it will inject the complete this values like this student class object values into address variable, because this variable is of type address. So it will inject all the values into this variable. Of course, we can also say this will happen at runtime. If I say runtime, it will not be, it is not wrong. So then it will ask the IOC, then we will ask the IOC container for to give us the student class object once all the injections are performed. So then the IOC container will create the object of student class and will give it to us after it injects all the address values and also the address object values into address variable. So this is called how injections are done. If you remember the first video, I have also talked about how injections in IOC container is done. So dependency injection is mainly done in two ways. Like I can say that this IOC container, this Mr. IOC container, can perform this injection into classes into two ways. This dependency injection is done in two ways. The first method or the first way is using the setter injection. Second name we can give for setter injection, and the second method in which the IOC container can perform injection, that is called the constructor injection. So what is a setter injection and this method, and how this constructor injection method is done? For example, you have a class called I'll go for the previous example, that is the student class. In student class, you can see that we have in the ID string name and address. So for this ID, we have one setter method. This is a setter method, and also to get this value, we have a getter method. The same thing, like same setter and same getter method we have for name variable, for address variable. It means that we can have here, and here we have for name variable, we have set name and also get name, and also for address variable we have a pair of setter and getter, that is set address and get address. Through these we can get values or set values. The same scenario is applicable for address class. For address class also we have the same pair of setters and getters for each variable, like street, city, state, and country. So this depends. IOC will perform using the setter injection, using the setter methods inside our classes, our bean classes. We can call them as bean classes. So in setter injection, the IOC will call the setter methods in order to inject the values. But in getter, in constructor injection, like in this one, sorry, injection. So in constructor method, I mean the constructor way, I mean the second method. So here the IOC will call the constructor to set the values. How it is performed, it is like this. So you can see that we have a student class. Inside student class we have ID, name, address, and you can see that in this method or in the second method or in the second way we have the student class constructor. Through this constructor the IOC container will inject the values. So in setter injection or property injection, we can call that, the IOC container will use the setter methods in order to inject the values, and in constructor injection the IOC container will use the constructor in order to inject the values. So the same constructor that we have here with the name student, so we can also have in address class. In address class we also have a constructor calling address. So instead of student we have address, because the constructor should be the same name as the class name. So there the constructor is address. So in address we have a string. We will have the first value will be string street, the second value will be string city, the third value is a string state, the fourth value is a string country. If you remember in the previous example, I showed you how we have the student class and also we have the address class. So in the setter in the setter injection, we have the setter and getter methods in both student class and address class. In constructor injection, we have constructors in both student class and also in address class. So the IOC container can use one of these methods. So this depends on us how to which way to inject the values. The first we learned about what dependency is and how dependency is performed. The second we talked about the methods of dependency injection, and that's we said that there are two ways. And now the question comes here, and how IOC container performs the injection. So the IOC container can perform the injections using the configuration file. All the information to IOC container will be given in configuration file. So IOC will pick up all the information from configuration file and perform the injection. So what is configuration file? So what is configuration file? In fact, configuration file is the XML file through which we provide the information to IOC container. IOC needs the information of classes in order to create object. If you remember that we say that IOC container is responsible of three important things. These performs three important functions. That's creating object. That's the first. The second one is injection, and the third one is holding the object. These are the three important functionalities the IOC container performs. So IOC needs the information of classes in order to create object, perform injection, and also hold the object in the memory. Now the question comes here that how this information is given. So the classes that we introduce in configuration file are called bean classes. So actually bean class has some rules. The rules are like the for bean class rules. These are the rules that a bean class must have. The first one is that it should implement the serializable interface. This is the first one. The second one should have public or no argument constructor, should have public or zero param public, should have public and zero param constructor. This is the second rule. The third rule is here that all properties in Java bean class must be private. All properties in Java bean class must be private. And the fourth, all properties in Java bean class must have setters and getters. These are the rules that we have for bean classes. So an XML configuration file is a file where we declare bean class and its dependency. So we can also say that configuration file is an XML file through which we provide the information to IC container, and the XML file is a file where we declare bean class and its dependencies. Now, how is it done? So in the previous, I talked about an example of class student. And also we had another class that's called class address. So we have two classes. First one is a student class and the second one is address class. These are the two bean classes. Because here we had the ID, name, and address. So all these three variables were private, and also we had setter and getters. In this class also we had the variables like street, city, state, and country. They were private. So now what we have to do is that in XML file or configuration file. In configuration file, I'll show you in details how the configuration file code is written. In configuration file we have a tag called beans, and inside beans we have some other child tags. They're called bean. This is the first bean, this is the first bean, this is one bean, and this is the second bean, and this is the second bean. And you can see that we have beans. This is the opening tag, this is the closing tag, this is beans. And inside beans we have one bean. It is for one class, that is for student class. And we have the second bean, this is the second bean, this is for the second class. Here in this configuration file we define that which class is dependent on which class. For example, in the scenario in our scenario, student class is totally dependent on address class. So this information will be provided to IOC container through XML file or configuration file inside the beans tag, which is the parent class parent tag. And inside beans tag we have bean tags. They are for defining or showing the dependency classes or the bean classes. So this is what a configuration file is and what a configuration file does. Now we'll talk about the types of data that IOC can inject into from one class into another class. IOC container can inject three types of data types from one class into another class, and these three types of data types are like primitive type, non-primitive data type, and collection type. Or so the first type is primitive type. Primitive type, they are like byte, short, int, float, double, long, and character, char. And the second type are called non-primitive data types, like we can also call reference type or user-defined type. Non-primitive or reference type or user-defined type, they are like what? They are like we made an example before, if you remember, the address class we had. For example, in our student class, we had a variable address of type address. So that address is a user-defined or a non-primitive data type or reference type. So this is the second type that IOC can inject the value, and the third one that is the third one we can call that they're called collection type. Um, in collection type, we have list, set, map, and properties. These are the data types that IOC container can inject from one class into another class. So in today's about what is dependency injection, methods or ways of dependency injection, what is configuration file, and types of data types that IOC container can inject. So this is enough for today's video. In the next video, I'll make a project how to do all these steps in practical, and we will also implement the same project like a student class and address class, and how they will be injected, and how to create configuration file, and in configuration file how can we define the Java bean classes. So we'll catch you in the next class. Take care. Goodbye.